Let's move now to the U.S. and a controversy engulfing prestigious Harvard University, in which the issue of what constitutes legitimate criticism of Israel sits at the center. Last year, the Carr Center for Human Rights Policy at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government offered a fellowship to Kenneth Roth, the former head of the organization Human Rights Watch. But that offer was overruled by the school's dean, Douglas Elmendorf, reportedly due to accusations that the criticism of Israel by HRW under Roth and his own statements were one-sided, obsessive, and sometimes crossed the line into anti-Semitism. Roth mounted a public campaign against his rejection, including a piece in The Guardian this week titled, "I once ran Human Rights Watch. Harvard blocked my fellowship over Israel." And today, Elmendorf reversed his decision and approved Roth's Harvard fellowship, writing in a public letter, "In the case of Mr. Roth, I now believe that I made an error in my decision not to appoint him as a fellow in the Carr Center for Human Rights. The broader faculty input I have now sought and received has persuaded me that my decision was not the best one for the school." Well, joining me now for more is our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim in New York. And Mike, it's well known some academic disputes are petty, but there are some serious issues underlying this particular situation in Harvard.
No doubt whatsoever. There's so many different dynamics to this. Number one, it must be clear, there was never originally a formal offer to Ken Roth. The dean essentially vetoed what would have been the offer. But there are policies, longstanding policies there within the Harvard Kennedy School that were written in part by this particular dean, Doug Elmendorf. And those policies strictly define the process of fellowships because they had problems in the past with donors getting involved in the process. And those policies laid out by the dean said, listen, we want to have a vast spectrum of opinions, a vast spectrum of perspectives amongst our fellows. Great. Any particular political, nothing's off limits per se, but it has to align with the school's values, which is apparently, though it was never defined that way, where Roth ran into a problem. It also explicitly forbids any donor involvement in the process, which is what Roth was accusing the school of doing, was having donors come in and dictate the process. Donors it's made clear the second they sign over their money, you don't get any say in anything that goes on here, essentially. So there's a lot of different accusations that were made as to who exactly got to the dean to get him to veto Roth's appointment. It's never really been clearly defined or put out there publicly, but it was viewed by critics of Roth as more anti-Semitism of Jews, rich Jewish donors, got the dean to turn his decision around. It's never really been proven. Roth, on the other hand, as we know, a critic of Israel, but his own critics say it veers beyond criticism of Israel. It's a hyper-focused, hyper-obsessive focus on Israel that even the founder of Human Rights Watch said had crossed the line into anti-Semitism at times. So many different angles here. In the end, Ken Roth will win this battle. It'll be interesting to see what his fellowship is really defined as and how he carries forward with it, and whether that focus on Israel will continue to the extent that it did at Human Rights Watch.
Right. I just want to point out, of course, the issue of Human Rights Watch under Ken Roth and its attitude to Israel, especially its designation of Israel as an apartheid state just in the last couple of years, has long been a subject of criticism. But as you said, not just the HRW itself, but Kenneth Roth himself on social media, and some of the tweets he's used, even in this recent weeks, have raised questions about his if you want to call obsessiveness, bias, and as you said, some have said verging into anti-Semitic views by Kenneth Roth.
That's right. You know, recently with the flare-up in Gaza last year, in May 2001, he tweeted out essentially blaming victims of anti-Semitism for Israeli policies, saying, hey, if you would get Israel to turn around their policies, then you wouldn't be beaten in the streets of the United Kingdom. That's not exactly verbatim language, but that was his point, that particular period of anti-Semitism was as a result of Israel's policies vis-a-vis Gaza, rather than just anti-Semites being anti-Semites and taking out their hatred on people thousands of miles away from the battlefront. It's tweets like that that critics have really seized upon, saying, you know what, this isn't just criticism of Israel. This goes into anti-Semitism, and that was one of just a few examples that critics have cited.
Right, and I should note there was a lot of fierce debate in the last couple of weeks over when Kenneth Roth publicized his initial rejection by the Kennedy School at Harvard, and I expect in the coming weeks we're going to be hearing a lot more from those who start wondering what was the process, what did the dean of the Kennedy School hear that made him reverse his early consideration in rejecting Kenneth Roth's fellowship. Mike Wagenheim there in New York. Thank you for that.